I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
Question is that this House do now adjourn. Matt Vickers.
Mr Deputy Speaker, myself and my honourable friend and neighbour, the member for Sedgefield, are incredibly grateful to be able to bring this debate today on the proposed Byers Gill solar farm. Byers Gill is a proposed solar farm stretching across agricultural and arable land between Stockton and Darlington. The proposed site neighbours a number of other solar farm sites already approved and others being brought forward for approval, meaning the cumulative impact on this beautiful rural community will be getting on for almost 2,500 acres. The plethora of solar farms snake through and encircle some of the most beautiful rural villages in the region. In fact, some of the most beautiful rural villages in the country. Villages and farms and even a local primary school are merely metres away from some parts of these sites. But it's not only villagers and farmers who will be impacted. This area is inhabited by a rich tapestry of wildlife and biodiversity. I was contacted by one resident whose family had farmed locally for generations and who will have the solar farm just feet from her boundary. She shared with me the list of species that regularly visits her plot. Badgers, foxes, hares, deers, pheasants, woodcock, snipe and grey partridge, which are of course a red list species. They have daily visits from herons and have seen coots, moorhens, geese, swans, various ducks, swallows, owls, buzzards, sparrowhawks and bats. A 2,500 acre scar on this countryside will undoubtedly affect these animals, their habitat and food chain, and this resident is rightly devastated. Where now,
bringing this forward, and he's absolutely right to highlight the issue of the wildlife impact, but also the loss of good agricultural land. Is it not time that the Minister and Government and those developers, potential developers, understand when it comes to good agricultural land, it should be retained for food production? That's what we want to see, not the loss of land for a solar farm.
I could not agree more, and it's something I will be coming back to, but there is a balance. There is a balance between energy security and food security is incredibly important to many of the jobs we've just been talking about in the previous debate, where now people drive along country roads and look onto beautiful rolling fields. These views will be replaced by miles of 7-foot-high fences to prevent the movements of deer. Residents, many of whom have lived in the villages and farmed the fields in that area for generations, have shared with us their huge concerns about the impact of a development of this scale will have on their community. They understand the need to improve our energy security and the move to renewables, but the sheer cumulative scale of the solar farms densely packed into this small rural community will change it completely. An area characterised by rurality, nature and agriculture looks to become characterised by industry, panels and battery substations. But aside from the aesthetics, from the complete change in the character of this rural community, the damage to people's quality of life and the huge impact on biodiversity, this decision will also be about balancing competing interests and priorities. Energy security is a huge challenge for our country, but so too is food security. Ironically, this debate follows one about the challenges faced by our farmers. Many of them are looking at how they improve their financial outlook as they're approached by developers and have to make incredibly difficult decisions for them and their families. Our great British farmers are the stewards of our countryside, care for our natural environment and put food on our plates. We must back them so they can carry on doing so. This is prime agricultural land, and myself and residents agree with the words of the Prime Minister when he said we must protect our best agricultural land. On my watch, we will not lose swathes of our best farmland to solar farms. Instead, we should be making sure that solar panels are installed on commercial buildings, on sheds and on properties for this. I hope that the Planning Inspectorate will ensure robust and independent grading of this land takes place so it is given fair consideration and ultimately protected for generations of farmers to come. At present, there are more solar farms pending approval than the national grid could hope to service. So let's ensure that these solar farms, that any solar farms we develop, are proportionate and rightly placed. There are further specific concerns about what the scale of this industrialisation will mean for the community. There are huge concerns about the about moving permeable green land into the muddy underbelly of acres of solar panels, and the real consequences that will have for country roads that are already suffering from flooding problems. The dangers and risks of battery storage systems, like those destined for the site, are well known and documented, but situating such a battery storage system near residential properties and in close proximity to a school is deeply worrying to residents. Many residents have expressed their concerns about the way in which the developer JBM have failed to undertake adequate consultation. In fact, many would go as far to say they've actively stifled it. I've heard from several residents who feel their voice has been given no concern in this process. Many residents were not afforded circulated consultation materials, and in fact, I understand just 12 of the 356 affected residents received them. Only 120 planning brochures were printed, and illogically, these were placed in a library 9 miles down the road, inaccessible to many of the affected residents. Stakeholder meetings were organised, residents never informed, and a face-to-face consultation was held in Stockton Marketplace, miles away from the site. An incorrect location was given to residents. Then the representatives that were there left early, so those who did turn up never got to speak to them. These make up part of a catalogue of failings and are well documented and will be made available to the Planning Inspectorate ahead of their decisions. I'd personally like to pay tribute to the residents from the affected villages and those who've taken a role in bringing together the Bishopton Villages Action Group to stand up for those local residents. They've shown the amazing power of community and what it can achieve. They've shown exceptional professionalism, mustering and utilising all of the expertise in their community and raising a huge amount of money to oppose these plans. They've produced professional submissions at every level, and I hope the Planning Inspectorate will read carefully the report they've issued on JBM's failure to consult in line with their duties under the Planning Act. I thank the Minister for her time. I hope that today we'll be allowing residents' concerns to be thoroughly aired and look forward to seeing these proposals and the overwhelming cumulative impact on this community roundly rejected. Thank you.
I have no notice that the honourable gentleman has asked permission to take part in the debate. Does the owner of the debate and the Minister agree that Mr. Howell should speak? Yeah. Paul Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I apologise. You should have had notice. So it's an oversight on my office's part and of my part. I'd like to start by thanking the member for Stockton South as my neighbour, who shows the scale of the problem that he's in here with me speaking about exactly the same thing. And indeed, I'm sure that if the member for Darlington was able to speak, he would be speaking in exactly the same space as another neighbour who's also aware of the concerns that we've got with this proposal. As has been said, Byers Gill is a solar farm proposed to cover land between Bishopton and Brafferton in the Sedgefield constituency. It's an area I'm particularly familiar with, as I was actually married in Bishopton nearly 39 years ago. It's proposed to cover, as has been said, over 1,200 acres of land, and within the nearby region there are further proposals from other developers which increase this to, as been said, well over 2,000 acres. Residents have approached me and the member for Stockton South with significant concerns about both the scale of these developments individually and in aggregate, as well as the consultation process, in quotes, that's been followed. We've seen the proposals refined, to be fair, after an initial round of consultations, with some changes made reflecting some concerns. But I'd like the Minister to be cognizant of the following critical points. Consultation must be real. I got into politics because I felt the local Labour Council were paying lip service to consultation, and it was that they were just basically telling people what was going on instead of actually engaging and trying to consult properly. So I'm particularly sensitive when I hear concerns about poor engagement. After my last meeting with the Residents' Action Group, I reached to the developers to discuss these concerns. They have agreed to meet, and unfortunately I had to postpone the meeting that was scheduled, but I know that I'll be catching up with them in the next few weeks, and I hope that they will be listening to what's going on today and react to the concerns. Because after all, it's not what they say to me that matters, it's what they say to my constituents and the people that are actually affected at the sharp end of this situation. So the feedback from my residents concerns me massively, and as I say, I'll be raising it again when I go back with the developers. And whilst communication always requires two parties to engage, sometimes people don't listen or people don't hear. I always believe that the primary responsibility for good communication rests with the sender, not the recipient, and I would encourage the developer to really get on top of their game there. On a slightly linked point, if the Minister was able to cast the farming debate earlier, then she'll have heard about the concerns of farmers in this space. Farming economics is pushing farmers to accept solar farms on their land when they may prefer to keep farming. It's an imperative that we as a country develop our food resilience, and it's critical that we are robust in our assessment of the land that could potentially be used for solar to ensure it's not consuming good farming land. I've heard concerns, as has the member for Stockton South, that the assessment of land, whether it's grade 3A or 3B, is possible by some that may have vested interest in the process. We must ensure that assessment has integrity and robustness. And it's a real value to our rural communities that the character of their communities is maintained. We need to ensure that the multiplicity of schemes in an area like this are jointly assessed to be certain that planning creep does not overwhelm an area. As I said, to have over 2,000 acres under possibility of coverage in such a small, concentrated area is surely not reasonable. We also have rules and guidance about payments made to communities to support them when schemes like this are approved. These must not only be explicitly fair and robust, they must also not be merely bribes for compliance. It's important for the long-term resilience and value of our rural communities that they do not turn into effectively large industrial parks, destroying our green and pleasant land. I support solar. I think it's one of the greening power sources that we must develop in the right place, but it cannot be at the expense of the rural community's way of life.
Amanda following.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend, the member for Stockton South, for securing this debate relating to the development consent order for Byers Gill solar farm. And I'd also like to acknowledge the contribution of my honourable friend, the member for Sedgefield. Both have shown incredible commitment, both today and previously, in raising awareness of this case within this House. I must say from the outset that for proprietary reasons, I'm unable to comment on the specifics of this proposal. Byers Gill is considered a nationally significant infrastructure project, as defined in the Planning Act of 2008, and would be determined by the Secretary of State. I understand that an application for the Byers Gill solar farm was received by the Planning Inspectorate on the 9th of February 2024. The Planning Inspectorate is responsible for considering whether the application should be accepted for examination and, if accepted, carrying out the examination of the application on behalf of the Secretary of State, who will review their report and make the final decision. Given the quasi-judicial role of the Secretary of State in determining applications, I hope you will appreciate that I cannot comment on the specifics of Byers Gill solar farm or any other proposed infrastructure project, as this could be seen as prejudging the outcome of any proposal subsequently submitted for decision through the planning process. I can, however, set out how planning works for large solar projects in general terms. There are established routes in the planning system to consider the impacts of solar projects and to enable communities to raise concerns about developments in their areas. Developers taking projects through the nationally significant infrastructure project regime must complete considerable community engagement before any approval is granted, giving communities and local authorities ample opportunity to feed in their views. When a developer submits an application to the Planning Inspectorate, it must be accompanied by a consultation report. In this document, the developer must demonstrate that they have complied with the statutory pre-application consultation requirements and that they have had regard to the responses which they have received. Amongst other things, the report must provide a description of how the intended applicant has informed and influenced by those responses, outlining any changes made as a result, and provide an explanation as to why responses advising on major changes to a project were not followed, including advice from statutory consultees on impacts. If an applicant has not followed the advice of the local authority or not complied with guidance published by the Planning Inspectorate, they must provide an explanation for the action taken or not taken. Upon submission of an application, the Planning Inspectorate will write to relevant local authorities and ask for their views on whether or not the consultation has been adequate. The Planning Inspectorate will consider the consultation report, alongside any representation made by a local authority on the adequacy of the developer's consultation and the other application documents before deciding whether or not to accept the application for the examination. The planning system sets out how applicants and decision makers should consider the impact of solar projects on the land use, the local environment, wildlife, biodiversity, and of course landscapes. And this should also include consideration of cumulative impacts, for example, where several solar projects are deployed in close proximity. The Infrastructure Planning Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2017 obligate all large solar developers to complete an environmental statement as part of any application. The environmental statement requires developers to consider all potential impacts during a project's life, from pre-development to construction, operation, and also to decommissioning. The environmental statement must be conducted by a competent expert, and this means that all surveys and studies, including soil surveys, must be conducted and overseen by experienced members of the relevant professional field, such as ecology or geology, and of course comply with relevant codes of conduct. As set out in the recent designated national policy statement for renewable energy infrastructure, while land type should not be a predominating factor in determining the suitability of solar site location, applicants should, where possible, utilise suitable previously developed land, brownfield land, contaminated land and industrial land. And where the proposed use of an agricultural land has been shown to be necessary, poorer quality land should be preferred to higher quality land, avoiding the use of best and most versatile agricultural land where possible. In terms of the safety of battery storage, it is a priority of this government to ensure that an appropriate, robust and future-proof health and safety programme is sustained as the industry develops and storage deployment increases. And this framework is kept under review to respond to changing circumstances. Recent reviews have considered both the planning system and the environmental permitting regulations. The United Kingdom was the first major economy in the world to introduce legally binding net zero legislation. We cut emissions by half between 1990 and 2022, while growing the economy by 2/3, decarbonising faster than any other G7 country. In 2021, the government adopted its sixth carbon budget for the period of 2033 to 2037. To reduce emissions by circa 78% by 2035 compared to 1990 levels. And the government has also committed to decarbonise the electricity system by 2035, subject to security of supply. And this will require deployment across a range of homegrown green technologies at an unprecedented scale and pace. Renewables such as solar and wind, alongside other low-carbon technologies like nuclear, will underpin the UK's transition from reliance on fossil fuels to the new secure clean energy system. Solar deployment is a key part of the government's strategy for net zero, energy independence and clean growth. We're aiming for up to 70 gigawatts of solar capacity by 2035, which would be more than quadruple our current installed capacity. And we need to maximise deployment of both ground mount and rooftop solar to achieve this ambition. I would like to close by again thanking my honourable friend for bringing forward this issue, and championing their constituencies. I will ensure that the points that they have raised are brought to the attention of other ministers who cover solar and planning within the government. And although I have not been able to discuss the specifics of this case tonight, please be assured that in taking the decision on any development consent application, the Secretary of State will follow the relevant requirements in the Planning Act 2008 and have regard to a wide range of matters which are both important and relevant to her decision.
Question is that this House to stand adjourned. Does many of that opinion say aye? Aye. Contrary, no? The ayes have it. Order, order.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.